For more than 3 years, the war in Ukraine has steadily escalated. The front lines remain locked in brutal combat, but increasingly, the battlefield stretches far beyond the trenches. Ukrainian drones now reach deep into Russian territory, striking Moscow, St. Petersburg, Crimea, oil refineries, military airfields, and critical infrastructure once considered untouchable. Each successful strike sends a powerful message. The war is no longer confined to Ukraine. And inside Russia, patience is beginning to wear thin. A growing number of nationalist voices argue that the Kremlin has been fighting with one hand tied behind its back. While Moscow continues diplomatic contacts with Washington, Ukrainian attacks inside Russia have become more frequent and more sophisticated. To Russia's hardliners, that looks less like restraint and more like weakness. Their message to President Vladimir Putin is becoming increasingly direct. Stop holding back, escalate, and if necessary, remind the world that Russia possesses the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth. One of the loudest voices belongs to Russian media tycoon and nationalist figure Konstantin Malafeev. His argument is blunt. War is about victory, whatever the cost. If previous generations spent decades building a nuclear arsenal capable of deterring Russia's enemies, why should it remain untouched while the country faces an existential conflict? The idea may sound extreme, but it reflects a growing current of frustration inside parts of Russia's political establishment. For years, many hardliners have believed the Kremlin has been too cautious. Despite its vast military resources, Russia has not delivered the decisive victory many expected. Instead, Ukrainian drones continue striking military bases, fuel depots, and strategic infrastructure hundreds of miles from the battlefield. To these critics, negotiations have produced little. Sanctions remain in place. Ukraine's long-range capabilities continue to improve, and the war shows no sign of ending. Their conclusion is simple. If conventional deterrence is no longer enough, perhaps nuclear deterrence must become believable again. But this is where military theory collides with political reality. Russia possesses thousands of nuclear warheads, including a large stockpile of tactical nuclear weapons designed for battlefield use. Unlike strategic nuclear weapons aimed at cities and continents, tactical weapons are intended to destroy military formations, command centers, air bases, ports, and logistical hubs. Even so, the consequences of using one would be enormous. A single nuclear detonation, even a relatively small one, would instantly transform the character of the war. The conflict would no longer be viewed as another regional war. It would become the first wartime use of nuclear weapons in nearly a century, and the world's response would be impossible to predict. Ironically, the military benefits might be smaller than many imagine. Ukraine has spent years dispersing its forces, hardening command centers, and decentralizing logistics. A tactical nuclear strike could destroy a specific target, but it would not guarantee victory. The political cost, however, could be catastrophic. NATO might not respond with nuclear weapons, but it could dramatically increase military support for Ukraine, tighten economic isolation, strengthen its military presence across Eastern Europe, and push Russia into even deeper international isolation. Countries that have tried to remain neutral could be forced to reconsider their position. The global nuclear order itself would enter dangerous new territory. That is why the loudest nuclear rhetoric may actually reveal something unexpected. Not confidence, but anxiety. The louder some Russian hardliners demand escalation, the more they appear to acknowledge an uncomfortable reality. Conventional warfare has not produced the outcome they hoped for. For Vladimir Putin, nuclear weapons remain Russia's ultimate strategic insurance policy, not a battlefield shortcut. Crossing the nuclear threshold would carry risks unlike anything the Kremlin has faced since the Cold War. A far more likely path is one already taking shape. More missile strikes, more drone attacks, greater pressure on Ukraine's energy grid, transportation networks, defense industry, and military infrastructure. In other words, escalation without crossing the nuclear line. Diplomacy, too, remains part of that strategy. Negotiating with Washington does not necessarily signal weakness. From Moscow's perspective, diplomacy is another battlefield, one that can test political resolve, divide Western allies, and preserve strategic options while the fighting continues. For now, the Kremlin appears determined to keep every option available. including the most dangerous one. Because in modern geopolitics, the greatest power of nuclear weapons is not always in being used. Sometimes, their greatest power lies in making the world believe they just might be.